Next question is for you, Tania. And it is, what are some solutions to inequality in New Zealand? But I might also ask you, if you're open to it, to reflect on, given that you raised it, to reflect on the social fabric and the social contract in New Zealand as well. There's a question about that, and Ganesh has just reflected on it. So it'd be interesting to hear your reflections, and then perhaps if you could move into some solutions to inequality in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you, Tania.
Hi. When I talk about the social fabric, I'm talking about the relationships that exist between all of us. And I would also think of it as a metabolism, and is it a healthy metabolism? So there's relationships that I have with my neighbours, obviously my whānau, but then there's complete strangers. How do I behave and act toward other human beings?
Yeah.
So what's the strength of that? Am I a bystander and willing to just kind of, as long as it doesn't touch me, I'm going to keep out of this? Or am I someone that cares about what happens to other people in my community, including complete strangers? So that's kind of what's meant by social fabric. And social contract is the language that's used to describe the relationship between us and the state, us and the economy. And I would also, kind of reflect back on where that came from. And, for us, I think that the social contract is really ripe, and picking up on Ganesh's point about te tiriti, is really ripe for us to reimagine what that social contract can look like. I think people think that distrust is, or the lack of trust in institutions like the public sector, which I work in, is the opposite of what the social contract should be. But it's not just distrust, it's alienation.
Yeah.
So how can we reimagine the social contract? If we're going to do it, let's do it now. It seems to me that there are enough red flags that this needs serious reconsideration. In terms of solutions, there is no single silver bullet. I think, picking up on Ganesh's point again about the short-term bias that we have in policy and investment decision-making, so I'm talking as a public servant, is a major barrier for us to tackling the root causes. So to Max's point about children, the best investment we can make is in the first 1,000 days of a child's life. That sets the trajectory for the rest of their life, and the science is undeniable in this. By the time we're doing, kind of prototypes at disrupting inequality further down the line, as they're rangatahi or pakeke, and they're older, the horse has already bolted. We need to stop the horse from bolting in the first place. All we're doing is creating an industry responding to the failure demand, and there is a lot of that. And the bravery that is needed by our public servants and by our politicians to say, no, this is a 20-year endeavour. I was the beneficiary of some really fantastic science-based policies by the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Gordon Brown, in the United Kingdom. So, for example, I got a fresh fruit and vegetable grant when I was hapu. My daughter, when she was born, she got what's called a child's ISA. It was an amount of money to be invested that she can draw on when she's 18, and of course the compound interest and the little gifts from her nanny and all the rest of it go in there as well. By the time she's 18, that will pay for hopefully more than 1 year of university. So these were long-term policy decisions where there was no immediate political payoff. I always, kind of, when we went into COVID, I kind of looked at what kind of public sector do we need? And it's the entrepreneurial public sector. It was the public sector that could balance common sense and smart risk taking. Like, for example, you know, the first Labor government, the state housing, building of state housing, that has paid dividends for generations and generations and generations. Notwithstanding that Māori weren't entitled to state housing until 1950. Nevertheless, and when I look at, you know, what Roosevelt did in the Great Depression of the US, and, you know, half of all trees that are in the States at the moment were planted by the Civilian Conservation Corps set up during the New Deal. He employed 10,000 out of work writers, artists, editors, librarians, you know, the cultural economy, the creative economy, and recorded real life, ordinary lives of Americans. Also sent them out to record the history of 2,000 elderly by then African Americans who had been emancipated from slavery. Now, if we didn't have those records, those archives, it might be a very different narrative about slavery. Oh, it wasn't so bad, etc., etc. So these things pay on and on and on. What I fear we have is a technocratic and administrative public management system. And what we need is a bit more of what we saw during the Great Depression, and the ability to get on and do things that we know aren't going to pay off within a political term, but we know we have to do them anyway. Kia ora.